you should be working on, and you rolling?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Should be working on your research paper. You should be looking at getting finished pretty much with the research phase of this thing. And so we're going to be talking about today, we're going to be talking about research paper expectations as well as the outline that you have due in just a couple of weeks. Okay? All right. So, when you read those two research papers last night and you had markedly contrasting research papers, if you don't think that they were contrasting, then you missed the point. Okay? Which paper was organized more effectively? Which paper did you award a higher overall grade to? Matthew, which paper did you award a higher overall grade to?
The one about the journalism.
Okay. Anybody differ on that? Anybody give an overall better grade to the one about Reagan? Did you? Okay. We'll explore that. So, Mark, you gave a higher grade to the one about journalism revolution.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why?
Well, with the other one, it had like this thing in the corner, and I took off the points for that, but they were both really close for me.
Okay. So you had a little problem with some mechanics, but
Yeah.
but content-wise, you thought they were pretty close.
Yeah.
Okay. Did both of them have a clear, arguable thesis? Did both of them have a clear, arguable thesis? Elena, you think? Both the same? Were both as strong as the other?
No, the second one was stronger.
Why?
Because it had a more specific point.
More specific points. You knew what you were going to read about when you got to it because of how specific the thesis was. Yeah? Yeah, or you should have. I know that's what I look for. When I read your thesis, then I know whether you're writing an LEQ or a DVQ or you're writing an 8 to 10 page research paper. When I read your thesis, you've let me know as the reader what you're gonna be writing about and what the opinion's gonna be as you write through it. Okay? Specific arguments there. Paris, specific evidence relevant to their argument. Were the papers the same?
I thought that the one about the power of the press had more specific examples over the other one.
Okay. That supported the thesis.
Yes.
Now, you can sit in there and you can throw historical facts in all day long for 10 pages. And you can keep doing that. You could do 20 pages of that. But if it's not supporting your thesis, then you're missing the point of that also. Okay? All right? Here's a big thing about readability and also your organization. We talk about is the evidence organized, that the evidence is organized or chunked. How you put the evidence together. Do you put it all in one huge 3-page paragraph? And some of you do. But what you should be doing is chunking these the evidence into cohesive sections, cohesive paragraphs that make the paper an effective argument for whatever thesis that you proposed, all right? Which one did a better job? That's what we're looking for here. All right, in a paragraph, and so often you all miss some of the basics, some of the stuff about writing sentences and paragraphs that you were taught a long time ago, all right? Paragraphs. First sentence in the paragraph is a topic sentence. The topic sentence should relate directly back to your thesis. If it doesn't, revise your topic sentence. The topic sentence is narrowing the subject of the paragraph. Every sentence in that paragraph relates right back to the topic sentence, which in turn relates back to the thesis. Remember that in this 8-page research paper, it ought to make sense if we just take your thesis statement and then we take every topic sentence. It ought to make sense. All the stuff that you have in your content paragraphs just relates back to the topic sentence, supports the topic sentence, which in turn supports your thesis. I, as a technique, would suggest that maybe you don't, well, certainly you don't want to be waiting until the last night to write this. That's going to keep you up very late. But besides that, what I've found is I write about 2 paragraphs, and then I stop. And then I go back and I revise those 2 paragraphs, and I make sure that the mechanics are right. I make sure that I've got good topic sentences. I make sure that everything I've written in the paragraphs relate back to and support that topic sentence, and that the topic sentence relate back to the thesis. And I don't try and write a whole bunch of stuff, about 2 paragraphs, because for me, as you're going to find out, a paragraph ought to be about a half page, maybe 2/3 of a page. But if you're getting off topic, then you need a new paragraph. Clear? Okay, so a just right paragraph is not too long. 2/3 of a page at the most. If it's longer, you're putting too much information in there. And probably you're getting off topic also. You're not staying with your topic sentence. So if you're analytical about the way that you write, if you are really wordsmithing this, when you find yourself with a 1.5-page paragraph, go back and look, and I bet you're going to find that you've gotten off topic. And what you need is a new paragraph. You need to find a new topic sentence. Okay? So, what you're trying to do is organize and chunking your information into what becomes a digestible piece for me, the reader, or for you, the reader, or for whoever you're having proofread your paper. You want your information in digestible chunks. All right? You also don't want it too short. Paragraph should be at minimum how many sentences? Yeah, 5 sentences. That's good. Topic sentence, 3 supporting sentences, conclusion sentence that maybe transitions you to the next paragraph. Okay? But probably your paragraphs are going to be longer than 5 sentences. But no one or 2 sentence paragraphs. Don't do that. Okay? All right. Better wordsmithing. Camille, which paper was better, was a more readable paper?
I thought also the journalism one was. It was
Yeah.
just really clearly organized, and they like flowed with the topic sentences for each paragraph.
Okay, yeah, yeah. The other one, the way that it just organized and the way that the mechanics of it, you know, you're short, choppy paragraphs. I didn't like that, okay? Some of you guys, like I say, you are too much on the other and your paragraphs are too long, but the first, let's see, I guess it was paper B, the paragraphs were really short and chopped up. Okay? Mechanics do matter. Spelling, punctuation, grammar. Remember, I'm no grammar Nazi, but, you know, if you have a bunch of run-on sentences in a paper that you've got this long to prepare, look at, critique, all of that sort of thing, and you've got run-on sentences or fragment sentences or gross misspelling, if you are depending on spell checker, don't depend on spell checker. It's not going to work. 2, there. It's not going to get it, okay? And if you try and use L-E-A-D as the past tense of leading, don't do that either, right? Yeah. Okay. Remember your basic requirements for documents and sources. 3 books. Hardback books, they should be scholarly. As we say, not from the children's nonfiction collection. Right? You know, I don't want to see something like a Golden Book Child's history of the United States. I don't want to see that. And you're laughing, but I've seen it, okay? Don't do that. You're supposed to be doing scholarly work here. Ebooks from the ebook academic collection. You've got the world through the library in terms of scholarly works to be able to find out whatever there is out there on your subject. Okay? EBSCOhost. Okay? One scholarly journal. JSTOR. If you haven't gotten into JSTOR and figured out how that works, that's your best bet. And you can get to that through our library also. JSTOR's got all kinds of scholarly journals and articles from it. Peer-reviewed, and that's what we're looking for. That's the problem with if you just go online and you don't, it's not from a database, you're looking at, anybody can write anything and nobody's going to review it. And it's not necessarily right, or certainly scholarly. Okay, so don't use that stuff. Use this. One other source. What can the source be? Well, that can be another book. It can be a second journal article. It can be an approved internet site, approved by me. Okay? Let's see if they say that. Really, 5 sources for a 8 to 10 page paper, that's really not enough. You should have more. The 5 sources is a bare minimum. You should have more than that. Go more rather than less. All right. Source variation. We want to see source variation. And yes, there's going to be bias in point of view. Really, a legitimate historical source is going to have a point of view. It's going to have a bias. And as a matter of fact, it's a stronger paper if you find a source that differs with your thesis, that is opposed to your thesis, and you're able to argue your thesis and show why you're right, and maybe that person their argument is not quite as strong. That shows a stronger work on your part. Okay? So different points of view do exist in history, and every source that you have should have a point of view. I would submit to you that if you can't find a point of view in the sources that you're using, your sources are too simplistic. They're not scholarly enough. They should have a point of view. In order to prove your thesis, you need to show that several historians agree on the interpretation of the research that you use. But that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking at your interpretation. I'm not looking at a bundle of facts. I can get that stuff myself. I want to know what you have to say and what your interpretation of the historical facts are. It's just like a longer version of the LEQs and DBQs that you write. So, as a result of this, all of this being true, you need to mix your sources through the paper. You need to show that more than one expert agrees on the same topic. If you cite 5 sources, you got your 5 sources, which is your minimum, but you're using each source for 2 straight pages, that's not a research paper. You're writing a book report on 5 separate sources. Don't do that. Don't do that. Diversify your sources on each page. There's an example. 1 paragraph. And you've got 3 different sources within 1 paragraph. That is what we call source variation. You want to have source variation. Okay? Clear on this? You thinking in terms of this? Do. Okay, research plan. You're way past the point where you should have picked a subject that you're interested in. Okay? Anybody thinking that they picked the wrong topic and maybe they need to do something else? I hope not, because as I say, at this point in the game, you should be about done with your research. About done with your research. Okay, again, your sources should be grown-up historians. Research notes, and everybody should be using some kind of note cards, whether they're actual real deck of note cards that you write on in pencil or pen, or digital note cards. You need to have a variety of people that you can cite in your footnotes to show that you diversified your sources. Okay? When you write your notes, put them in your own words. If you don't, if you copy down, if you quote, then you're liable to do that when push comes to shove and you're writing your paper, and that's not what we're looking for either. The only time, to me, the only time that you're writing a quote is from a primary source. Okay? Now, if you're quoting from one of your sources, you better qualify that source and say why we should care, what specifically, why we should look at the quote from this non-primary source, from this eminent expert that's a professor at a university. Okay, maybe. But I would prefer to see quotes from primary sources and you paraphrase what your expert sources have to say, non-primary sources. Okay? That's just kind of a bias on my part. All right? Yeah. Keep track of page numbers. Remember that one of the requirements is when you turn this in that you're going to have to photocopy the page. And you're going to have to highlight where you got that information. If you don't keep track of the page numbers and the book titles, and it comes time, you're wrapping up your paper, you've pretty much got it written, now you've got to fulfill the requirements for turn-in, and you've got to go back and reconstruct your research, that's going to take you longer than writing your paper. It's going to take you a long time. So keep track of your sources as you're writing, as you're taking notes. Know where those things came from. All right? So it says here, note cards, either paper note cards or digital note cards. Digital note cards are wonderful. Back in the days before there were computers, I used to not be as diligent about using a paper note card as I should have been, but now I understand about having this real deck of note cards that you can shuffle, reassemble, get it into the order that you really want to have before you write your paper, whether it's a real deck of note cards or it's a virtual deck of note cards that, again, you can do the same thing just by cutting and pasting and rearranging and things like that. You want to do this with note cards. That's going to ease your writing immensely. Make sure that you use your rubric. Make sure that you're getting the points that you deserve. Use the rubric. Get the maximum number of points in each one of those parts of the rubric. Okay? All right, outline. Outline. You finished your research. I really hope you have before you do this outline. You should have finished it. You shouldn't necessarily use all your note cards when you write this thing. You may find stuff that as you're outlining, as you're organizing your information and starting to write, you go, yeah, I don't need this. This doesn't fit. Okay, that's fine. It's not a waste of time. You just did some research that you're not going to use. People do that all the time. So you finish your research, you've decided on how to divide your research into sections, and then topics, and then subtopics. That's the way you're going to outline. It's the blueprint of the way that you're going to write. And as I say, every year people say, well, how much detail should I put in my outline? And I say, it's kind of up to you. I mean, the more detail you put in your outline, if you can break it down into sections, topics, and subtopics, if you have every single topic sentence already figured out and in your outline, boy, isn't that going to make writing the paper easier. Yeah. Okay, let's go to an example. All right. When you're beginning your outline, what you want to look at and ask yourself is what information needs to be included. Answer the 3 questions based on your thesis statement. What info is needed to provide context to the reader to understand the topic? Your thesis. What evidence is needed to convince the reader that your argument is valid? And then finally, how do I want to organize this information so that it'll make sense? It'll make sense to whoever is reading it. Again, I urge you, I strongly urge you to make sure that, especially on an 8 to 10 page paper, you proofread this thing minimum of like 3 times. And remember, if it doesn't make sense to you when you read it, each individual sentence and paragraph, if it doesn't make sense to you, it's not going to make sense to me or any other reader. So make sure that you proofread. A lot of you guys are kind of weak on your proofreading. Okay, make sure you do that. So, how do I want to organize the information so that it'll make sense to the reader? Should it be done chronologically? Should it be done topically? Should it be done in a compare-contrast kind of a thing? You're familiar with all of those methods of organization. Pick what fits best for your subject, for your topic, for your thesis. Once you've listed the information in those 3 sentences, you got to answer these questions. How will, or what will, the body sections in my paper, the major parts of the paper, they'll run anywhere from 1 to several pages in length, and they'll typically be composed of several paragraphs. Okay? Sections are marked with a Roman numeral. When in doubt in organizing your paper, remember the 5-paragraph model. Clearly, you're going to be writing more than 5 paragraphs in this 8 to 10 page research paper, right? But remember the 5-paragraph model. You're going to write an introduction. You're going to tell me what you're going to tell me. Then you're going to have 3 sections. 3 sections is good. If it takes 4, okay. But you're going to make 3 main points. That's always handy. It's always going to work. And then you're going to do a conclusion. Conclusion in this case may take 2 paragraphs, but it may only take 1. So you're going to make body sections in the paper, and for the outline, Roman numerals will mark the sections. The topics to cover in each section. The topics may be either a paragraph or multiple paragraphs, and you're going to use capital letters to mark these on your outline. Then, beneath the topics, you're going to have subtopics, and these are going to go under the topics. Subtopics could be a paragraph also, but they could be just several sentences within a single paragraph. Okay? Arabic numerals are used to mark this in your outline. And you got to remember, what sources are you going to use? What are your resources that you're going to be using for each subtopic? All right? Okay, here's a thesis. And next I'm going to show you an outline. Thesis, an examination of the texts of Jesuit missionaries, Puritan missionaries, and U.S. government on the practice of polygamy among various American Indian tribes reveals that, while polygamy ultimately met its end because it was a direct challenge to Christian ideals, it also proved extremely difficult to wipe out, and indeed it continued well into the 20th century as a symbol of defiance to Anglo-American imposed culture. That's the thesis. Okay? So now let's look at an outline for that thesis. Okay. There's our thesis again. The introduction is one section. First contents section. Roman numeral 2, American traditions of polygamy. There's a topic sentence. By the time you outline, you should know your paragraph topic sentences. You should be there. Okay? Then subtopics. We have 3 of them. Okay. Next section, European views. Do you see how this is working? Do you see how this is organized? Okay. This is content organization. This is not necessarily chronological. And it also doesn't appear to be compare and contrast. Right? Okay. So sections. Go all the way down here. And finally, last section's a conclusion. Can you think about the research that you're doing now and picture doing that for your paper? You could be even more detailed than this. Yes, you should have topic sentences for all your paragraphs, but you could have subtopics in a sentence format. Again, it's going to make it a lot easier when you sit down to actually put this thing together and write it. All right. So have we questions? Do you know where you're going with this thing? How many of you would, this will caucus, I think we can cut this off.
Okay.